If you have a hard time with boundaries, how might your life be different if you could say no as easily as a joyful yes? I'm Love Coach Mariya, and for over a decade now, I've been encouraging folks to empower their compassion so it's big enough for ourselves as well as others, and so our boundaries can become healthier than ever. You're listening to Empower Your Compassion, and on this show, we'll be unlocking transformative insights to help you reconnect to your true yes, so you can say no from that more expansive energy and get more of what you want in your relationships and your life without sacrificing your compassion. Are you ready for more love? Let's grow. Hello. Today, I have a special guest. And she might actually become a semi-regular sort of co-host. She and I both thoroughly enjoy geeking out on personal growth and boundaries. So I very much look forward to introducing you to her. And while I have you though, I just want to remind you that you're amazing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me for the purpose of loving bigger and finding ways to enhance your life and your being and come into more authentic alignment so that you can shine even brighter and we can all live in a more loving world. So without further ado, we'll hop into today's episode. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Mariya Greystone, also known as Love Coach Mariya, and this is Empower Your Compassion. And today we have my lovely friend, Alina Prax, here to join. Full transparency, she is also a former client of mine. She is also a business owner, a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a vibrant community member, and I'm delighted to have her here. Alina, thanks for joining.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So I recall when we first met, it was at a local networking event, and I had mentioned that I work with boundaries, and you pretty much made a beeline to me, and you were like, I need to speak with you because I need some help.
I remember.
What would you be willing to share us a little bit about like what your experience was at that point?
Yeah, I think at that point, I knew that boundaries were kind of lacking, I guess, in my life, healthy boundaries, because I was experiencing a lot of burnout at that time and feeling pulled in a lot of different directions. So my energy was scattered, and what I was lacking and why I made a beeline towards you was I didn't feel like I had the language or the understanding of how to communicate my boundaries to people effectively without going to, an extreme place and setting a really hard boundary in a heightened emotional, out of a heightened emotional place. So either, really frustrated or angry or impatient, and I would just kind of snap. And I knew that there had to be a better way to protect my energy earlier on so I didn't get to that place. And when you so generously offered up a spot in your coaching workshop, I just was very excited.
Yes, this is exactly what I was looking for.
Uh-huh.
And you had been already, I think at that point, you had been reading some books on it, maybe listening.
Yeah, I had been doing my own research and reading books or listening to audiobooks mainly. And I realized, I was like, yeah, I think I have a boundary issue here. Not a boundary issue, but just I didn't feel well versed in setting boundaries appropriately or skillfully.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to explore what that would look like because I thought it would help me, and it has.
Yes. And before we talk a little bit more about how it has helped you and what it's like on the other side, I also wanted to just unpack a little bit more about the experience of it. Do you recall feeling like, I know you mentioned that you didn't feel like you had quite the language to communicate, but I'm curious if you were aware of any like hangups about some stories about it being mean.
I didn't really have any hangups. I know that's a common thing,
Sure.
especially in women who think, oh, well, boundary setting is mean or it's a punishment. I didn't really have any hangups around that. Uh, no.
Okay. Do you feel like you were saying yes too often?
Yeah, there was one thing that we had talked about early on that really resonated for me, and it was about uh, kind of having a knee-jerk yes
Hmm.
to any requests that came into my life versus slowing down and telling people, oh, that's interesting, let me sleep on it, or let me get back to you in a couple days, uh, or I or even I don't have the energy for that right now. I would just reflexively say, yeah, sure, or I'll do that, and I would want to, but it was coming from a place of genuine desire to help other people, but I wasn't taking into consideration my actual bandwidth or my actual, like, how much energy I had on a given day to expend on all these yeses that were well intentioned but was not sustainable for me. And so I ended up, I think, harboring unnecessary resentment that people probably would have been happy not to have if I would have just said no to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I do notice kind of like three main patterns. I've just kind of clarified them recently in terms of when we say yes too often. One of those patterns is the people pleaser, which is
Yes.
not, well, I would say in your case, the other one is another one is overachiever.
Hmm.
And then another one is savior or rescuer. And for the people pleaser, I feel like the experience, that like internal experience, is a little bit of a fear of saying no, and kind of like oh, like, well, of course I'll say yes just because I always have to say yes to everybody. The overachiever, though, is more of like a desire to do all the things. Like, you really want to like do a lot more than you actually can. Um, which of course is often also based on some subconscious level of fear. If I don't achieve all of these things, I won't be accepted.
Hmm.
Um, and then with the savior or rescuer, it's like a lot of what they're saying yes to is people needing help and like feeling like, oh, I have to save all of these people, because again, there's like this subconscious story that most people aren't aware of carrying, but it's a lack of belief in these people to be sovereign, capable beings. Um,
All of those are true.
yes, and I am sure that to some extent we all experience them. And it's like I'm inclined to say that what it sounds like you were saying was kind of more on the overachiever side, the part where you're just like, yeah, I can do all the things. I can like get involved in all of these things and help all these people. Or do you feel like it was just kind of a combination?
I feel like it was a combination, but if I had to score myself, it would probably be number one, people pleasing, number two, rescuer,
Mm,
and number three, like, overachiever.
mm,
And I've actually spent some time thinking about that in preparation for the call in terms of the people pleasing and
mm.
why that is for me personally such an ingrained habit. And of course, if for me, it sounds cliche to say, but it definitely comes back from childhood, and it definitely comes back from my family life growing up and how we were expected to behave in our family and in public. And there was always kind of this underlying sense of anxiety, like, you wanted to people please because you didn't want to rock the boat, right? My family of origin wasn't the most stable in terms of the emotional landscape in our household, so I adapted very on to try to navigate that, and people pleasing was one of the ways to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very prevalent theme in our culture as well.
Oh, yeah. I see it a lot in a lot of women.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I like to say this over and over again because I think it's really helpful. Um, at some point, I recognized it's, stuff coming out of developmental psychology and whatnot, and that when we grow up hearing things like, oh, you're driving me nuts, or even, I'm so proud of you, we end up feeling responsible for our caregivers, like feelings and stability as like
Yeah.
for us to be safe. And so we we end up prioritizing other people's needs and calmness and happiness. And it's the common perception of that when you see it in other people is it seems like they're prioritizing other people's needs over their own. But in reality, on like a nervous system survival subconscious level, we're prioritizing other people's needs as our own. So
Right.
it actually is a self-care. It's a faulty, dysfunctional mechanism, but I think recognizing that actually helped me have a little bit more compassion and for myself. And I think the notion out there, that that people who care about us, who see us as like a doormat, and it's like, man, you got to start prioritizing yourself more. They care and they mean well, but like what ends up coming off is that like you're doing it wrong. You're not loving yourself right or enough. And that just like adds shame. And that is not a like functional, helpful ingredient to the mix. So I think it was really helpful for me to recognize that like, oh, this is actually self-care. It's just dysfunctional.
Yeah. And I think something you said about it too really resonates for me. I think at least I was trying to keep my nervous system calm by taking on other people's emotional labor so that instead of prioritizing my own emotional labor and dealing with my feelings, I would try to take responsibility for theirs. And if they were okay, and if they were calm, and if they were happy, then I would be okay, instead of allowing them to have whatever feelings that they were having, or which of course I couldn't foresee, but I was coming from a place of like high anxiety, right? So I was assuming it was not going to be good. Um, so so yeah, it's just like really misplaced responsibility, and I'm still working on breaking that pattern. It's a really tough one to kind of crack. At least I feel like I'm at an awareness stage where I can catch myself and be like, oh, you know what, that's not mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes I love the analogy. There's this phase of personal development um, that we all go through. And it's, the earlier phase is unawareness. And then you have some awareness, and it takes time to like build up through the awareness stage to where you start to have more control. And in that earlier awareness phase, it's almost like uh, here in Texas, we have a lot of those. There's just a lot of interconnected freeways. And sometimes if you take the wrong exit, it can take you on like a mile detour that is unavoidable for you to like get back. And it's like you've taken the wrong exit and you're like, shoot. And then you just watch it happen. You're like, well, I see it happening. I see this shit show unfolding and I'm aware,
Mhm.
but you just have to go through it anyway.
I
Sometimes,
just have to correct course. It's going to take me an extra 10 minutes.
yep,
Oh, well.
yep. And sometimes it's like, oh, wow, yep, I'm totally carrying someone else's shit here. And at that point, you're not really at the place where even internally you can let it go, but you see it and you're like, yep, this is what I'm doing. It's dysfunctional, but at least I'm building awareness around it. And
At least
hopefully,
I realize it's
yeah,
dysfunctional.
hopefully next time I will catch it a little bit sooner. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, the part where we need to, where we feel this need to take care of other people's regulation, like regulate for them instead of
Yeah.
trying to regulate for ourselves, letting them have whatever experience they're having, it can be like terrifying on some
Oh,
level, right? If they're freaking out.
insanely anxiety provoking
Yes.
for me personally.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you're not alone.
Yeah. It's like,
Um,
oh, I think I'm going to be sick now.
right. And you just
Yeah.
scramble. You're like, what can I do to fix it?
Yes.
Here, have the candy, whatever you need, like just make it stop. Candy, of course, being metaphorical, but yeah.
Yeah. No, but if for the case of moms, like that is no, I think it's especially hard for moms, that part of it, because you don't want to see your child suffer.
Mm.
And so there's this impulse to step in and correct and make it all better. And sometimes, oftentimes, more than we think, that's the exact worst thing that we can do, because we're robbing them of that opportunity to feel that they have that own strength within themselves to handle it. Right. But yeah, I struggle with that. It's like, oh, I want to go in there and I want to fix it. But it's like, I take a step back.
I feel like there's sort of a natural progression that is ideal and unfortunately not very common, but it would go something like this. As a child, um, ideally, you have parents that help you learn self-regulation by letting you go through it. And also, you would get to observe the way that they regulate themselves and care for themselves and prioritize themselves, because kids don't learn what you teach them through like your words and whatnot. They learn to, especially how they treat themselves. They're not going to treat themselves how you treat them. They're going to treat themselves how you treat yourself.
Yep.
And so as a kid, again, you're getting that support in learning your own self-regulation, which starts, by the way, with you do have to do it for them a little bit when they're itty bitty, and that
Yeah.
helps them feel secure enough to start doing it once they get a little older. And then they also get to learn through modeling how to care for themselves. And then as an adult, they self-regulate, they care for themselves, they allow others to have their experiences, and then once they become a parent themselves, they repeat the cycle. Unfortunately, what tends to actually happen as children, as I mentioned before, we are unintentionally made to believe that we are responsible for our caregivers' feelings because we need them to feel okay so that we can feel okay. And
Yep.
that's how our nervous system gets wired. And then we grow up prioritizing other people's needs as our own. And we never even
Hmm.
learn how to care for our own needs. Our coping mechanism is taking care of other people. And
Exactly. And that's what it is. And it's especially hard, I think, if you grow up in any kind of dysfunctional family or family with substance abuse of any kind, where it kind of reinforces that pattern.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. And then of course you also, with the sort of mimicking, those adults around you aren't practicing self-care, and they're probably practicing a whole lot of sacrifice, right? Like
Yep.
the martyrdom. And so yeah, as I've mentioned before, and I think you touched on as well, we end up having this externalized source of security, and then we become that reflexive yes to the requester before we even process what the actual request was or whether or not we have the capacity for it. And
Yeah.
so I think that is another kind of circling back to the shame that society tends to unintentionally dump on people pleasers by saying like, you got to prioritize yourself. And it's like, well, like we are, we're just doing it poorly. But recognizing that we have that built-in impulse to say yes and appease and keep the peace and be everything to everyone, as that, like that is a safety mechanism, I think is helpful. I think it's more
Yeah.
helpful in finding your way out of it than shaming it.
100% agree. Yeah, it is a safety mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally driven by like a sense of self-preservation and survival. And it's like very deep.
Yeah. And I think I can't, haven't spent enough time reflecting on it to articulate it very well, but um, for whatever reason, recognizing that, okay, look, I do have a self-care mechanism in place makes it easier to be like, how can I shift it to be more functional instead
Yeah,
of coming from the story of, oh, I don't do self-care well. Like
right, right, right.
I don't have self-care. And then it's like,
Like
well,
I'm already a deficit
yeah,
here. Yeah,
yeah,
but we're
yeah.
not. We're working with stuff. We're just doing it slightly different
Yeah.
or
Room for
backwards.
improvement.
Yeah, we can upgrade this.
Yes, exactly. And I found that really helpful too. Like it just, I've been in my own journey of personal development and really self-love and like learning how to love myself more effectively. I prefer that than better.
Yeah,
One of the things that another common message out there when it comes to boundaries too is that it's rarely stated explicitly like this, but we get this notion that we're supposed to sacrifice our compassion, that we have to kind of armor up a little bit and like just say no, tell people to fuck off, whatever, like be firm. And it just felt so against the grain for me. I was like, but I have so much love to give. It just doesn't feel right to withhold it. And so when I realized that I could just kind of like channel it inward, I don't know, somehow it was just like, oh, and then I started learning more about like the oxygen mask rule, for example. It's like, oh, if I take care of myself, it was like I learned how to love myself in service of my love for others instead of like in opposition to it, if that makes sense. It's like, oh,
yeah,
the more like acknowledging that I have some limits and that doesn't mean I'm limiting myself in like the grand scheme of things. And then being responsible with my limits helps me stay resourced. And then I can actually show up to my relationships more loving instead of getting resentful and overextended.
yeah. Just backing up, one of the things that you just said reminded me uh, about. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what boundaries really actually are. Like, I think there's a weird negative spin on it, like you were saying. Like, it has to be this like harsh no, or you can't engage emotionally. And I don't believe any of. The more I've learned about it, the more I think that's completely false. And I think actually, if you can learn to set healthy boundaries in a compassionate way, it's actually very. It's a high level of self-care in and of itself to be able to do that, right? And it doesn't have to be mean or harsh or hurtful. In fact, if one does it skillfully, it gives that other person an opportunity to know that they're loved and they're cared for, but then they also are like, okay, what are my own resources right now if this person isn't available for this thing? And you usually, people figure it out. And they probably end up feeling afterwards more empowered than if you know I just were to rescue them. So I think there's a lot. That was something that was really interesting to me when I would tell people that I was working with you and doing coaching on boundaries. Like, certain people just kind of like looked at me funny and were like, "Oh, so you're just gonna like start saying no?" And I was like, that's a very interesting response there. Like, we won't get into who said it what, right? Because there's a relationship dynamic there already in place. But
Mhm.
I just thought, I was like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, boundaries are actually very healthy, and it's a positive, caring thing for both parties involved. It's like I'm also making sure that I'm not harboring any resentment towards you that you didn't know about going forward because I said yes to something that actually didn't have the energy to do. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. All of these things.
So,
And you
yeah.
mentioned earlier too, with this sort of people pleaser impulse. And it might have been in the context of perhaps a mother or a parent, but that you acknowledge that you were assuming that they might have a bad reaction to your no. And so you
Oh,
say,
100%.
yeah. And so you say yes, because you're like, I don't even want to take the risk of feeling the anxiety in me of them having, some sort of reaction or experience that I'm not equipped to deal with. And
Right.
I think that another kind of fascinating thing that we do is like similar to that, but different. We do this like preemptive resentment. So
Yes, that's what it's
sometimes,
called, the preemptive resentment, the preemptive anxiety. I like to tell our daughter, I was like, don't pre-freak. Don't pre-freak out to this situation yet.
yes. So the preemptive anxiety is what will often make us say yes.
100%.
And then the preemptive resentment is often what will make us say no harshly. So this is a little bit different than when we're like super overextended, in a way that it's like, no, I'm done. I don't have any more, that kind of that harsh no. But sometimes it's like the first question. And you're just like, how could you even ask me that? Or like, gosh, no, of course not. And it took me a while to kind of peel back the onion layers. I was like, what is that? And I realized that it's that misplaced responsibility where we feel responsible for this preconceived notion that they're going to have a hard time with us saying no. And so now we're just mad that they've put us in the position to have to be mean. And so it's like, no, gosh. Whereas if we were just like okay with whatever reaction, then it's just like, yeah, no. And then they can have whatever reaction. It's like, cool, that's on you. And even better,
Yeah.
shifting gears slightly, and also circling back to this common notion that boundaries is all just about saying no. What I really love, there's this whole richness that opens up when you realize that boundaries are actually about reconnecting to your yes and being able to say no from that more expansive energy. So, for example, if someone asks me if I want to go out tonight, in the more dysfunctional framing, I might either, if I don't want to, let's assume they've asked me to go out tonight and I don't want to, I might sigh and say, yeah, okay, and go and be resentful and bitter about it. Or I might say no, like super apologetically, and like, no, I'm so sorry. I really don't want to. Or I might be like, oh, God, it's a Sunday night. No, not going. But if instead I'm actually connected to my yes, because behind every no is a yes. And the truth is, if I acknowledge it, I'm a yes to staying in. And so if I acknowledge that, if they say, would you like to go out tonight? And in my head, I'm like, I would really like to stay in. Then I can say, no, thanks, I'm good.
Yeah.
And it can be easy.
But yeah, no, I think it's really powerful to shift the thinking around boundaries to when I say no to one request, I'm actually saying yes to some other need that I have that I'm attending to. Like one of my favorite scripted kind of boundary phrases that I took away was like, I'm not available for that, but I love you and I hope everything goes great.
Yes. I love the following a
Right.
no with a yes. And my default example is because I did have someone ask me to help them move like today, one day. Can you help me move today? Like,
It's always people asking you to move. Do you have a truck or something I need to know about?
it was only this one instance, but it always stuck in my head as the most outlandish request. I'm like, that's something you need to like plan ahead for. It was also the person had a pattern of those kinds of things. But so yeah, my default example is no, I can't help you move today, but I can help you unpack this weekend. Or the yes, to your point, can also just be like, but I still love you. And I'm really glad that you asked. And I look forward to connecting another time. It's just keeping that connection,
Yeah.
like realizing that we can say no without disconnecting is a really powerful way to soften boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other big lesson for me too was just because the response was so knee jerk, like this attempt to preempt the person or my anxiety with the person's response. Um, One of the things that became apparent to me in the course of our work together was that I wasn't slowing down enough to even like feel into what was going on with me in order to have like a clear answer about what I wanted or what I felt up for. And that was kind of a shocker because I don't know, I've always just seen myself as very opinionated, like I know what I want, I know what I don't want. And it was kind of crazy because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't actually even know really. Like because I'm not self-regulating. I'm not thinking about what my own needs are or my own emotional landscape. I'm like just bypassing all that and going straight to what's their emotional response going to be and like how can I mitigate that. And so now it's like I'm trying to practice this course correction where before I go there, even though I automatically go there because it's so ingrained, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Now I can, I'm talking to myself. I can see that you're feeling anxious about how this person's response might, or how, what they might say or how they might feel, but really what's like going on with you under the surface. And that's been like very illuminating and also probably the most challenging part of the work.
The
Yeah.
power of the pause,
Yeah.
right?
As long as
Well,
you do something with the pause, right? It's
sure.
it's not just pausing for pausing's sake. It's like feeling into it on an emotional, somatic, at least for me it is somatic.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the embodiment part is so important. And it took me a long time to break through that head to body barrier. Like there's sort of a barrier there, and it took so long to get through it. And fortunately, with sort of a series of different coaches that I worked with, just kind of getting little pieces here and there, and eventually it kind of broke through, and I was like, oh,
Mm,
there's my body. And then you start
yeah.
building it from there, and you start like growing in your capacity to detect the subtleties that the language of the body communicates with us in. And I think the biggest benefit to that, especially in this context of boundaries, is I think only through the body can we really discern the difference between safe and unsafe discomfort.
Yes, 100%.
And like that safe discomfort is good to push through and grow. And the unsafe discomfort is generally just going to like perpetuate trauma or dysfunctional patterns. And it's so, I don't know, funny, interesting to observe how often we swap them. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this horrible thing, I should keep leaning into that. And like, oh, that super safe things, no, it's too scary. But we don't identify them correctly, right?
Right.
But I gotta get in the body to be able to do that. And then it helps us kind of identify our boundaries better too.
Yeah. I think that's where I'll probably spend more time bringing my awareness to it because I've just realized for me personally, like my body never lies to me. Like if I can quiet down and like get in touch, it knows what's up.
Mm,
It's just that my rational part is either pushing it down, ignoring it, or just like bypassing it
mhm.
because because initially it's like, oh, that's too uncomfortable,
Right.
doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are coming to a close. Thank you so much for joining me today. And
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I always love talking to you.
I do too. And fun fact, we're going to go have lunch soon, and I'm looking forward to
Woo, me too.
that. It was also a delight working with you as well in my coaching program. So thank you again for your own
You.
self-awareness and self-care to come to me and be like, hey, I need this.
I tell everyone all the time. I mean, I think I'm like, go see Mariya.
I super appreciate it. Thanks again, Alina.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. And thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. We touched on a whole lot today, and we talked afterwards about how we could have dove deeper on any one of those subjects, and we probably will. Whether it's Alina or me by myself or other folks in my circle that I might bring on as guests, we will definitely continue unpacking all that there is to know about developing healthy boundaries. And I commend you for taking the time to do some work on your own, and whatever you can do to empower your compassion so that there's enough to go around. Thanks again. Bye for now.